Hello, this is Tarn with Home Brew Stuff, and today I'm going to show you how to do a yeast starter. I'm also going to cover the why and the when. To get started to do a yeast starter, you're going to need a couple of things. A piece of tin foil, some DME, a funnel, a Erlenmeyer flask. I'm using the 2000 Erlenmeyer flask, a burner, a stir plate, and of course an ice bath. You're also going to need yeast. Got 3 different kinds here that you can use. We've got dry yeast here, Safe Ale 05. Everyone's probably pretty familiar with that. We got a package of white yeast and White Labs. Today we're going to use the White Labs yeast, but I did want to cover a little bit about dry yeast and the white yeast. The white yeast I'm a big fan of because it does its own starter. That's why they call it a smack pack. Inside here you'll find the same stuff that I'm about to make with all these materials. It just doesn't swirl because it has no stir plate. Dry yeast you can certainly use. It helps your yeast to come to life, get active, and get prepared to make beer out of the wort that you've already prepared. It's certainly better than hydrating it. Gets them extremely active. When you pour unhydrated yeast into your fermenter, usually about half of them go into shock and they will die. Today we're going to use the White Labs. All White Labs should actually be used in a starter just because it has no activator in it, so they are all pretty much dormant. As for when and why to do a yeast starter, you should definitely do a yeast starter whenever doing a lager, just because they'll go into shock. Whenever your yeast is expired, you can bring them back to life. Or whenever you're using not enough yeast, say you want to breed 1 packet into enough for 15 or 20 gallons, you can certainly do that if you have a yeast starter with all of these pieces. Okay, we'll cut that. You can splice. Now, whenever doing a yeast starter and getting started, one rule of thumb that I found is really easy. You're going to need water and DME in order to make a small batch of wort in order to introduce your yeast into and get them started. I like to use 2 cups of water to 1/2 cup of DME. That's 2 cups of water per 1/2 cup of DME. I always like to use the Golden Light DME. It's extremely neutral, won't contaminate your flavor of the beer no matter pretty much what you're making. Right here I've got 4 cups of water and a cup of DME. So we're just going to bring this up to a nice rolling boil, and then we're going to stir in our yeast. Okay, so now that we've come up to a boil, we're going to add our DME. We're also going to add a little bit of yeast nutrient. I like Fermax because it's a yeast nutrient as well as an energizer. You want to use both. So we'll pull this off onto the hot pad here. You may want to cut it for a minute.
Hot pad.
So let's just remove this from the heat source. Turn that down just a bit. That's where the funnel comes in handy. Add our yeast nutrient. And be careful of boilovers. Some people like to do it in a pot and then put it in here once it's actually up to temperature. You want to make sure it goes in here extremely hot though, so that it purifies any bacteria that's in there. See what I mean about foaming up? And luckily I came prepared. one solid chunk. So we're adding this other component. One solid piece. And now we're done with the funnel. Now, always important to use a hot pad. It will get quite toasty. We'll put this on for about 10 or so minutes. Just let it come to a boil and pasteurize, and then it'll be ready to cool down. I like to use the Erlenmeyer flasks because not only can you actually cook in them, but I can put it directly into an ice bath. It's not going to shatter, it's not going to crack. That's exactly what it's designed for. This one here is made of Direx. I'm not sure what the D stands for, but it's a derivative like Pyrex. Works roughly the same though. Now that we've come up to a boil, boiled it for about 10 minutes. We're going to take it off to the heat. Like I said, as you can see, don't let it overflow. It will want to do that. Looks like we did catch it in time. So I'll turn off my plate here. And then just remember one thing. If ever you're trying to breed up yeast, you want to start small just like this, and then add more later that has already been pasteurized. You do want to step it up. If not, your pH balance is going to go completely out of whack. Your yeast are not going to ferment out completely, nor are they going to breed. And that's one of the things we're really trying to achieve here is more yeast by breeding. Okay, so now we've got our ice bath up here and ready to go, still steaming hot. Remember, use a hot pad. If you break one of these, you will have to get another one. That's never any fun or cheap. Set it right in there. If you get a nice good stir on it, you're going to get a lot more surface area to this, and it's going to cool down a lot quicker. So, just kind of submerge it as much as we can in the ice. Give it a good swirl. Remember one more thing too, that neck is hot. You're going to want to make sure that it's completely cooled down before adding your yeast, including the neck, even though the bottom may be cool. If you actually try to add yeast and it touches the top where it's hot, yeast will die. They don't like temperatures anywhere above 90 degrees, anything above 80, and they get very, very uncomfortable. So just keep spinning it until it cools down to the touch. Getting some steam non-rolling off this anymore, so looks like we're cooling down quite well. Ice is melting. Gotta stir that up in there a little bit. So anytime you're doing anything, unless it's a Y yeast package, make sure that you bring it down to about 70 degrees. That's the most comfortable temperature for yeast. Anything below 75 is fine. I like to keep it right around 70. That's when they're most comfortable. 70 is about a little colder. See, there we go. 70 degrees is a little colder than the temperature of your body, so if it feels cool to the touch, you're probably good. Just in case you don't have a thermometer around. I can still feel this neck is pretty hot though, so I'm going to submerge this a little bit more in here, see if I can get that neck cool. Neck's still hot. Basically we're not adding, even though it's a small batch of beer, we didn't add any hops. because we're not really making beer, we're just making sugars for them. We make it out of beer though, so it doesn't contaminate the flavor. If you're making mead, use honey. If you're making wine, some of the best things that I find is either a small batch of wine, grape juice or whatever, not wine, of course it has alcohol, but grape juice, or even orange juice if you're using an old recipe like my mom used to use. You want that citric acid. So orange juice has sugar. Anything with sugars in it, the yeast will love. They will try to ferment. They will breed in. Container's a little warm, but we're almost cooled down. We're just about to temperature now, finally. Just want to go over your gravity on your starter, just like in the yeast package. It's set at about 1040. That's one of the most comfortable areas that they feel comfortable in as far as breeding and eating. What you don't want is for the gravity to be higher than what you're about to pitch them in. Then they won't be hungry. You don't want it too low because then they'll still go into shock. One of the best rules of thumb, I heard this from John Palmer, was about 2.020 below whatever you're going to pitch it in, except at those higher gravities. Anytime you do a higher gravity, you want to do a starter. It's going to help your yeast eat up all those sugars, the excess sugars that are in there. But the higher gravities, I don't like to bring it up higher than anything around, 1065 is about as high as I like to go. Just because you don't want them lethargic when you put them in there. You still want them hungry and active. So I think we're about to temperature. Next feeling cool. It's about 75 I think, so I think we're about ready to pitch our yeast. But again, 1040 is one of the prime areas that you want your gravity, if you want to take a gravity test. But like I said, 1040 is roughly a half a cup of DME to 2 cups of water. Okay, so we've got everything cooled down. We've got our components here, a little bit of star sand, tinfoil, yeast, stir plate, magnet, and our flask with our 1040 amount of beer in there. So, get that centered. Tinfoil to the side for a minute. So, first, and this is the reason that you get the spray bottle of star sand. I could have put the magnet in there, but I don't like doing that. I'm afraid that it might kind of corrode it and break down the plastic that's on it. Never drop it in. You could crack your flask. Always drop it to the side. Also allows you to find it better. As you can see, it's very hard to locate in there. It gets a little murky. I believe I've pretty much pitched it towards the center. We'll know when we turn it on. We're going to take our yeast. Like I said, we're taking White Labs for this one. Ooh, they're active. Get in there. They got excited. Ready to come out and have some fun. I always look at it this way. If you aren't having a mishap or two while you're doing it, you're not really making beer. You're just following instructions. All right. That. Put your yeast. Okay. Yeah, looks like we got almost all of that container. Put this to the side. I like to save these because I will sometimes when I go to harvest yeast, and I'll be trying to do a video of how to actually harvest some yeast. But when I do that, I like to store them in this, put them in my fridge for hibernation. So, best thing I've found to do this, they're going to want a lot of oxygen. Oxygen causes them to procreate, as well as the spinning action. You'll see the spinning on this. hear it. So you want a little bit of a vortex. You can see a little bit of the stuff stirring up. And there's our little vortex. You want a little vortex, any type of movement in there, you just want to keep them moving. A large vortex looks really cool, not necessary. In fact, it can be counterproductive if it's spinning too fast. So all you really want is something for them to completely circulate on a constant basis. So that the entire thing is moving and always moving. That puts your yeast into suspension, and it makes them want to procreate. It's just the right environment. Now, I never put a cork on one of these, never put an air stop. I don't even like the foam stoppers. Foam stoppers, I hear, work pretty well. I don't know if you get the right amount of oxygen. What I like to use is tin foil. Just spray that down. Star sand. Star sand is fine for your yeast, even if it gets in there. It's going to break down into a yeast nutrient. Yeast loves star sand. So, didn't crimp it too tight. Now I've got it on there. You can see it's actually spinning still. I've got enough that while it's spinning, while they're breathing and creating CO2, you'll actually, if you put a match by it, you can see a little bit of a breeze. And that vortex with some going out is, of course, sucking in some oxygen. So it's going to make them breathe. You want to leave your yeast on here for a minimum of like 3 to 4 hours, maximum of 3 days, unless you're actually building them up, in which case you're feeding them food on a constant basis so they have plenty to eat. What you want is them to fully attenuate out, not to actually start dying off before you pitch them into the beer. And I'm Tarn with Homebrew Stuff. That's how we do a yeast starter.